shock start, the basketball world thought they were watching the rise of a dynasty. Instead, they might be watching it collapse before it even fully begins. Victor Wembanyama, the most hyped young prospect in a generation, is standing at the edge of something no one expected this early in his career: elimination pressure in the NBA Finals. 2 games into the biggest stage of basketball, and the San Antonio Spurs are already down 0-2. Not just losing, not just struggling, but getting out-executed, out-coached, and out-experienced in real time. And now the series shifts to Madison Square Garden. If you understand what that means, you already know this is not just another game. This is the Garden, the most iconic arena in sports. A place where momentum doesn't just swing, it explodes. 20,000 fans who've been waiting decades for a moment like this are about to turn every possession into a pressure test. For Wembanyama, this is supposed to be his stage. The 7'3" unicorn. The future face of the league. The player who blocks shots at the rim and pulls defenders out to the three-point line like it's normal. He was supposed to be untouchable by now. But after 2 games in this series, the numbers tell a confusing story. He scored 26 inches game 1, he followed it with 29 inches game 2. On paper, that looks like a superstar carrying his team. But anyone actually watching knows the truth feels different. The rhythm isn't clean, the possessions don't flow. The mistakes are stacking up at the worst possible moment. And the Spurs, they're losing anyway. Game 1 slipped away at 105-95. Game 2 was even worse in a different way. A 1-point heartbreak, 105-104 after holding control early. That's not just a loss. That's a warning sign. Because when you can't close games you're supposed to win, the playoffs don't forgive you twice. What makes this situation even more dangerous is what's happening behind the box score. The Knicks are not just surviving Wembanyama's scoring burst. They are actively shaping the game around him. Every possession feels like a decision tree designed to pull him into uncomfortable spaces, force him into mistakes, and wear down his patience over 48 minutes. And the scary part? It's working. Now the series moves into Game 3 at Madison Square Garden, where the pressure doesn't rise gradually. It hits immediately. One bad stretch, one quiet quarter, one defensive breakdown, and the entire building shifts against you. There is no neutral ground here, only momentum and noise. For the Spurs, this is already close to must-win territory. Teams that fall behind 0-2 inches, the finals almost never recover. History is not on their side, and everyone in that locker room knows it. For Wembanyama, it's something even more personal. It's not just about scoring, it's not just about highlights. It's about whether he can control the game when everything around him is designed to take it away. Because right now, the question is not whether he is talented enough. Nobody doubts that anymore. The real question is whether he is ready for a series that is already trying to define him before it's over. And Game 3 is about to force an answer. The Garden is waiting. The Knicks are ready. And Wembanyama is walking into the most hostile environment of his young career with the series already slipping through his fingers. Before we break down exactly how the Spurs got here and what has to change next, tell me where you're watching from. If you're still here and locked in, press 1. The false stats. On the surface, the numbers look like everything is fine. That's the trap. Because when you see Victor Wembanyama putting up 26 points in Game 1 and 29 inches, Game 2 of an NBA Finals series, your first instinct is simple. Superstar performance, no problem. You assume dominance, you assume control, you assume the Spurs are right there, just a few adjustments away from evening the series. But the reality inside the film room tells a completely different story. These aren't clean 26 and 2-9 point games. These are survival games. Wembanyama is scoring, yes, but he's scoring in fragments, in bursts that come between mistakes, rushed possessions, broken spacing, and moments where the Knicks force him to play out of rhythm. Every bucket feels earned twice, once against the defender and once against the system trying to slow him down. And that's where the real problem starts to show. Because the Spurs are still losing, Game 1 ends 105-95. A double-digit loss where the score looks competitive only in stretches. Game 2 is even more painful, 105-104. A 1-point collapse after San Antonio controlled key moments early in the game. These aren't blowout, they're slow breakdowns. The kind that start small and end in silence. What makes it worse is how fragile the margins are. One possession changes everything. One turnover, one missed rotation, one forced shot in the wrong moment, and suddenly a 1-2 point lead disappears. That's what happened in Game 2. The Spurs built control early, with Wembanyama active, aggressive, and attacking. For a moment, it looked like they had solved the pressure, but as the game stretched deeper, the Knicks started to apply their real identity: physical defense, controlled pace, and calculated mismatches. And San Antonio started to crack. The most dangerous part isn't the losses themselves. It's how predictable the breakdowns are becoming. The Knicks are not reacting to Wembanyama. They are planning for it. Every possession feels like it has a structure underneath it, designed to pull him away from comfort zones and into decisions made under pressure. And when that happens, the numbers stop meaning what they used to, because 29 points with 4 turnovers is not dominant. It's exposure. 6 turnovers in Game 1, 4 more in Game 2. That's 10 total in just 2 finals games from your franchise cornerstone. And each one of them becomes something worse than just a mistake. They become transition opportunities for New York, free momentum, free points, free control of the tempo. Meanwhile, the Knicks don't need perfection. That's the part that should worry San Antonio the most. Jalen Brunson can struggle and still win. Karl-Anthony Towns can shift between scoring and spacing and still control the matchup dynamics. The bench can step in and maintain pressure without dropping the level of execution. The system holds even when individual performances fluctuate. The Spurs don't have that luxury. When Wembanyama slows down, everything slows down. When he forces a shot, the offense stalls. When he gets trapped, the possession often dies with him, and the Knicks know it. That's why the scoreboard keeps tightening late in games. Not because San Antonio is collapsing in one moment, but because they are slowly being pulled into a game where every possession becomes heavier than the last. By the fourth quarter, that weight becomes visible, not in highlights, in hesitation, and that's where this series is really being decided, the Knicks' identity. If you only look at stars, you miss the structure. That's exactly what's happening in this series. Because while everyone is focused on Victor Wembanyama's scoring output, the New York Knicks are doing something far more dangerous. They are not trying to win moments, they are trying to win pattern. And right now, they are controlling every pattern that matters. This is not a team relying on one player going nuclear. This is a system designed to survive bad nights, absorb pressure, and still execute in the final minutes. And in the NBA Finals, that kind of stability becomes a weapon. Jalen Brunson doesn't need a perfect shooting night to control the game. Even when his shot is off, he manipulates tempo, draws defenders into uncomfortable rotations, and keeps the offense organized under pressure. In Game 2, even while shooting poorly, he still dictated the rhythm of the final stretch. That matters more than the stat line. Karl-Anthony Towns adds another layer entirely. He is not just a scorer in this series, he is a tactical disruptor. When he steps out to the perimeter, the entire geometry of the court shifts. When he posts up, he forces help rotations that open driving lanes. When he stretches the floor, he drags rim protection away from its natural position. That combination is what is breaking San Antonio's structure. Because the Spurs are built around vertical control, protect the rim, dominate inside, and force opponents into contested shots. But when Towns pulls that anchor away from the paint, everything becomes unstable. Wembanyama is forced into constant decision-making outside of his comfort zone, and the rotations behind him start to lag by just half a step. In the playoffs, half a step is everything. Then there is the bench. This is where the gap becomes even clearer. The Knicks are not experiencing a drop-off when their starters leave the floor. The intensity stays consistent. The spacing stays clean. The execution stays disciplined. That allows them to survive the quiet minutes of a game without losing control of momentum. San Antonio cannot say the same. When their bench enters, the spacing tightens, the ball movement slows, and suddenly, every possession starts to feel like it needs a hero play just to stay level. That pressure eventually flows back to Wembanyama, who is forced to carry more than just his scoring role. He becomes the entire structure. And that is not sustainable in a 7-game series against a team that is built to apply pressure from multiple angles. What makes the Knicks even more dangerous is their patience. They are not rushing. They are not chasing highlight runs. They are waiting for breakdowns. A missed rotation here, a rushed shot there, a defensive hesitation at the wrong time. And then they strike. It's not loud. It's not chaotic. It's control. And that control is exactly what separates them in this series so far. Because while the Spurs are trying to match talent, the Knicks are winning discipline. And in a series this tight, discipline is starting to look like dominance. The Wemby problem. At this point in the series, the box score is lying. Because if you only look at the numbers, you think Victor Wembanyama is doing his job. He's scoring. He's putting up 2 0+ points every night. He's still showing flashes of dominance that remind everyone why he was called a generational talent in the first place. But the truth inside the film tells a different story. This is not a control situation anymore. This is survival. Every possession Wembanyama touches feels heavier than the last. Not because he can't score, but because the Knicks have turned every decision into a test of patience, timing, and pressure. They are not trying to stop him with one defender. They are trying to slow him down with structure, and it's working. From the moment he catches the ball, the floor already looks smaller. The help defense is ready early. The angles he normally uses to attack the rim are already cut off. Even his first step doesn't feel as clean. because New York is dictating where that first step is allowed to go. That's where the real issue starts to show. Wembanyama is beginning to hesitate, not in a dramatic way, not in a visible breakdown, but in small moments that change everything at this level. A half-second delay before driving, a glance instead of an immediate attack, a dribble that doesn't go forward because the lane feels less open than it should, and in the playoffs, hesitation is the beginning of control loss. The Knicks understand this better than anyone. They are not chasing blocks or trying to physically overpower him on every play. Instead, they are forcing him into late clock situations where he has to create against a set defense rather than reacting to it. And that changes his entire game. Instead of attacking in rhythm, he is now solving problems under pressure. Instead of flowing into his moves, he is recalculating every possession. Instead of dictating terms, he is responding to them. That shift is subtle, but it is decisive because it shows up in the most important category of all, turnover. Live ball mistakes that immediately turn into transition points, missed reads that become fast breaks, over dribbles that collapse spacing and kill possession value. These are not random errors. They are the result of constant pressure stacking up over time. And New York is capitalizing on every single one. What makes it worse is that the Knicks don't need perfection from Wembanyama to win. They are comfortable letting him score as long as the rest of his game becomes inefficient. A difficult 28 points with turnovers and late clock possessions is a win for them because it doesn't break their structure. It feeds it. Meanwhile, every time Wembanyama is forced into a tough shot or a rush decision, the Spurs lose more than just a possession. They lose rhythm, they lose spacing, and slowly, they lose the identity that got them here in the first place. This is the real trap. Not that he isn't good enough, but that he is being forced to be perfect just to keep pace. And over the course of a full game against a disciplined team like New York, perfection is not sustainable. So even when Wembanyama is scoring, even when the stat line looks respectable, the feeling is different. It doesn't feel like control. It feels like resistance against a system that is slowly tightening around him with every possession. The cat weapon. Karl-Anthony Towns isn't just another star in this series. He's the piece that is quietly breaking everything San Antonio is trying to build. Because every time he touches the ball, the Spurs are forced into a decision they don't fully want to make. If Wembanyama stays in the paint, Towns steps out and punishes them from distance. If Wembanyama follows him to the perimeter, the entire interior opens up for drives, cuts, and easy finishes. There is no stable defensive position that solves both problems at once. That is the real danger. It's not one action. It's the constant switching of roles within the same possession. And over time, that creates instability. The Spurs stop playing defense on their terms and start reacting to whatever Towns does next. That reaction-based defense leads to small breakdowns, late rotations, missed help, and mismatches that New York immediately turns into scoring opportunities. Then comes the foul pressure. Towns has been smart about forcing contact in tight spaces, putting Wembanyama in situations where he has to defend without margin for error. One wrong step, one late contest, and it turns into free throws or another trip to the bench. And every time Wembanyama leaves the floor, the balance of the game shifts. Not dramatically in one moment, but gradually, possession by possession, until the Knicks are fully in control of tempo. That is what makes Towns so important in this series. He doesn't need to dominate statistically to change everything. He just needs to force constant adjustments from a defense that is already stretched thin. And right now, every adjustment San Antonio makes to contain him is opening something else for New York. The paint trap, this is where the series stops being about scoring and starts being about survival. Because the real damage in this matchup isn't happening at the three-point line or in transition, it's happening in the paint, where every possession becomes a physical negotiation. And right now, Victor Wembanyama is getting pulled into that negotiation over and over again. The Knicks have figured out something simple but devastating. If you can force the Spurs anchor into constant contact situations, you can control everything that happens next. It starts with Karl-Anthony Towns and the way he attacks space. Every time he catches the ball near the elbow or inside the arc, he puts pressure on Wembanyama to make a split-second decision, contest the shot, or protect against the drive. Stay vertical or risk giving up position. There is no safe option, and that's how foul trouble begins. A hand check here, a late contest there, a second of hesitation turning into body contact under the rim. It doesn't look dramatic in real time, but it stacks up quickly. First foul, then second foul, then suddenly the coaching staff has to change everything. Because when Wembanyama is in foul trouble, the entire Spurs identity shifts. The aggression drops. The rim protection softens. The perimeter defenders lose confidence knowing there is no safety net behind them, and the Knicks feel it immediately. They start attacking more directly, they stop avoiding contact, they drive into the paint with confidence. knowing the biggest deterrent is either sitting on the bench or playing carefully to avoid a third or fourth foul. That changes the geometry of the game. Now, the Spurs are not protecting the paint the same way. They are not switching as freely. They are not rotating with the same aggression. Everything becomes a step slower. And at this level, a step slower is enough. What makes this even more dangerous is that the Knicks are not rushing this process. They are not forcing highlight plays. They are patiently stacking pressure, possession after possession, until the structure naturally bends. And once it bends, it doesn't snap back easily. Because even when Wembanyama returns to the floor, the mental effect of foul trouble stays with him. He becomes more cautious, less aggressive, slightly less willing to fully commit to blocks or contests at the rim. That small hesitation is exactly what New York is hunting. Every drive becomes a test. Every post touch becomes contact heavy. Every defensive rotation becomes a calculation instead of an instinct. And slowly, the paint, the area where Wembanyama is supposed to dominate, stops feeling like his territory. It starts feeling like a trap. And once that happens, the Knicks don't need to beat him in every possession. They just need to keep him thinking. Experience gap. At this stage of the series, talent is no longer the separator. Experience is. Because when the game tightens, when the possessions slow down, and when every mistake starts to feel louder than the last, the teams that survive are not the most athletic or the most explosive. They are the ones that have been there before. And that's exactly where the Knicks are pulling away. New York doesn't panic in these moments. They don't rush possessions when momentum shifts. They don't abandon their structure when the Spurs make a small run. Everything they do is built on repetition actions they've executed hundreds of times before under pressure. Jalen Brunson is the clearest example of that calm. When the defense collapses, he doesn't force. He reads. He slows the game down to his pace, not the pace of the moment. Even when shots aren't falling, his decision-making keeps the Knicks stable. That stability is something the Spurs simply don't have yet, because for San Antonio, these moments are still new. Victor Wembanyama is carrying a responsibility that most players don't face this early in their careers. He is not just scoring. He is organizing, reacting, and trying to stabilize a system that shifts depending on how the Knicks attack him. And in the fourth quarter, that pressure becomes even heavier. Possessions shrink. The floor feels smaller. Every defensive stop requires perfect timing. Every offensive possession requires complete clarity. And that is exactly where inexperience shows itself. A missed rotation here, a rushed shot there, a defensive miscommunication that leads to an open look in the corner. None of these mistakes are catastrophic on their own. But in a finals game, they stack quickly. The Knicks recognize it immediately. They don't try to force hero plays. They simply wait for the small cracks. A late closeout, a delayed switch, a rebound that isn't secured cleanly, and then they turn those small openings into points without overcomplicating the game. That patience is a product of experience, and it's showing up most clearly in how both teams handle pressure possessions. When the Spurs need a bucket, the offense often flows into isolation or late clock creation. It becomes reactive. When the Knicks need a bucket, they still run structure, they still move the ball, they still trust spacing and timing, even in high-pressure moments. That difference compounds over time, because in a long series, experience doesn't just help you win close games. It helps you avoid losing control of them in the first place. And right now, that is the gap separating these two teams more than anything else. The turning points. This series isn't being decided by one big moment. It's being decided by a chain of small ones. Because when you go back and watch Game 1 and Game 2, there isn't a single collapse that explains everything. There is no one possession where the Spurs lose the series. Instead, there is a pattern. Slow, repetitive, and brutal. Small leads that disappear, possessions that look normal until they suddenly aren't. Moments where San Antonio is in control, and then isn't anymore. That's what makes this Knicks team so dangerous. They don't need a knockout punch. They just keep landing clean, efficient blows until the opponent's structure starts to loosen. And once it loosens, everything starts to change. In Game 2, the Spurs built a real first-quarter lead. Energy was high, Wembanyama was aggressive, the offense looked fast, confident, and direct. For a brief stretch, it looked like they had finally matched the intensity of the moment. But then the game started to shift in layers. First, the Knicks slowed the tempo. Then they tightened defensive spacing. Then they started winning individual matchups just enough to flip possessions, not all at once, not dramatically, just consistently. That's the part that hurts most for San Antonio, because there is never a clear warning sign. The scoreboard doesn't suddenly explode. The lead doesn't vanish instantly. It erodes. 2 points at a time, one stop at a time. One missed shot at a time, until suddenly the game that felt controlled is now tied, and then it's no longer tied. And then the Knicks are ahead. From that point on, everything becomes harder for the Spurs. Shot selection gets tighter. Decision-making speeds up. Players start reacting instead of executing, and Wembanyama, who is supposed to slow the game down with his presence, starts feeling the pace speed up around him instead. That reversal is critical because it shows that control in this series doesn't belong to the team that starts strong. It belongs to the team that can sustain structure when fatigue and pressure start to hit. And right now, that team is New York. Every turning point in these games follows the same pattern. The Knicks absorb pressure, stay within their system, and wait for San Antonio to make a mistake. Then they convert that mistake into points without overextending themselves. No chaos, no desperation, just control. And over the course of a full game, that control becomes the difference between a close contest and a one-point loss that feels heavier than it should. Adjustment war. At this point in the series, everything comes down to one thing: adjustments. Because talent has already been proven on both sides. Wembanyama has shown he can score, Brunson has shown he can control tempo, Towns has shown he can stretch the floor and disrupt structure. The Knicks system has shown it can hold under pressure. So the question is no longer who is better, it's who can change faster. San Antonio enters this phase with urgency. They cannot afford another slow start, another late game collapse, another stretch where possessions go dead because the defense is already set before they initiate action. The first adjustment has to be aggression, not reaction. Wembanyama can't keep waiting for the defense to show him what to do. He has to force contact early before the Knicks can load their help defense. When he plays downhill immediately, the entire structure of New York's coverage becomes more vulnerable. Late rotations become harder. Double teams become riskier. Fouls become more likely. The second adjustment is direction. The Knicks have been guiding him into predictable lanes. If San Antonio doesn't change that, nothing else matters. Attacking different angles, changing entry points, and forcing mismatches on the opposite side of the floor becomes essential. It's not about one move. It's about breaking defensive anticipation. The third adjustment is off-ball movement. Right now, too much of the Spurs' offense is static when Wembanyama doesn't have the ball. That allows New York to reset defensively too easily. Cutting, screening, and constant motion are needed to prevent the Knicks from loading up early on every possession. The fourth adjustment is discipline. Turnovers are killing momentum. Every live ball mistake becomes instant transition points for New York. In a series this tight, those possessions are not recoverable. Cleaner decisions, quicker reads, and simpler resets become more valuable than highlight plays. And finally, the most important adjustment: closing quarters. The fourth quarter has been the Knicks' comfort zone. San Antonio has to flip that, not by forcing hero shots, but by controlling possessions, slowing the game when needed, getting to the free throw line, taking away transition opportunities. Every possession becomes about control, not volume. But even if all of these adjustments are made, there is still a bigger question underneath everything. Can they actually execute them under this level of pressure? Because making adjustments on paper is one thing. Executing them inside Madison Square Garden in a final series against a team that thrives on discipline and patience is something completely different. And that's where the real battle begins. Final verdict. This is the moment everything in this series has been building toward. Not just a game 3 inches Madison Square Garden, not just a 2-0 deficit, but a defining question about Victor Wembanyama and how fast greatness is supposed to arrive in the NBA. Because talent is no longer in doubt. That part was settled long before this series began. The Spurs don't have a future star. They already have one. A 7'3" matchup problem who can score from anywhere, protect the rim, and bend defensive schemes just by standing on the floor. But the playoffs don't reward potential. They reward execution under pressure, and in this series, the Knicks have been the more stable team in that category. They have controlled tempo when games tighten. They have trusted their system when shots don't fall. They have leaned on experience instead of panic. And most importantly, they have forced San Antonio into reacting instead of dictating. That is why the Spurs are down 0-2. And that is why Game 3 matters so much. Because at this stage, it is no longer about correcting small mistakes. It is about whether those corrections can actually survive inside the most hostile environment in basketball. Madison Square Garden does not wait for adjustment. It punishes hesitation immediately. For Wembanyama, the challenge is deeper than scoring. He has already proven he can get points at this level. The real test is whether he can control possessions when the defense is fully set, when foul trouble is looming, and when every decision is being read before it is made. That is what separates stars from players who define era. The Knicks understand this. They are not trying to overwhelm the Spurs with chaos. They are trying to outlast them with structure. Every possession is built to create small advantages that stack over time. Every defensive rotation is calculated. Every offensive action is designed to force one more decision than the defense wants to make. And slowly, that accumulation becomes control. For San Antonio, the path is narrower, but still open. They have to simplify, they have to play faster without rushing, they have to trust movement instead of isolation, and they have to accept that perfection is not required, only discipline is. Because one clean stretch can change everything in a series like this, but it has to happen now. Not later, not in Game 4, not after another adjustment cycle. Now. So as Game 3 approaches, the pressure is no longer just on the scoreboard, it is on identity, on decision-making, on whether a young superstar can adapt in real time when everything around him is designed to break rhythm. The Knicks have momentum, the Knicks have structure, and the Knicks have a 2-0 lead that already feels heavier than it looks. But the Spurs still have something that can change a series instantly, a player capable of taking over any game. The question is whether he can take over this one in the way it actually needs to be won. Not with highlights, but with control. And when the ball tips off at Madison Square Garden, we will find out if that version of Wembanyama is ready to arrive.